Welcome to Renew Conversations. This is the second year we are celebrating Pride. And with this edition, we aim to create a greater understanding of inclusion, allyship, and diversity and talent within the workforce. As per World Population Review data, only about 8% of the global population identify as LGBTQIA. There's a larger percentage, however, who do not report how they identify. Prevailing social conditions, social taboo, and stigma are among the reasons why people hesitate to speak up. But as a fast evolving, diverse world builds a case for companies' commitment to diversity, equality, and inclusion, companies prioritize DEI in their core function. It is said that diverse companies are 25% more likely to experience better performance, growth, and profits. The question we are asking today is, can we have a better communicative aspects to competency, empathy, creativity, and growth? How do we bridge the awareness gap? With us today, we have Anjali Gopalan, founder of NAS Foundation, one of the leading queer rights advocates of the country. Welcome, Anjali.
Thank you so much.
On Anjali's right, we have Ajay Tripathi, the Chief Human Resources Officer at Tripathi. So welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you.
My question to you, Anjali, is, and it's a pretty broad, as we have discussed just before the interview, it's a broad stroke, and please let us know. 8% people globally are identifying as LGBTQIA+, which is obviously not the correct figure. But why are we talking about this in the 21st century? Can you please help us identify the gaps?
Well, I think what happens is in this predominantly heterosexual world, there is this assumption that people from the LGBTQI community need to be open about their sexuality. They need to be out there. And my question is very simple. We are not telling straight folks to go onto rooftops and shout about being gay, about being straight. So why do we expect that of gay people? Also, I think there is another aspect. If we want people to be really comfortable and open about who they are, you have to create an environment for that to happen. The laws are very hostile. Attitudes are hostile. So why would anyone take that risk? And I've been doing a lot of work with corporates now over the last few years. And it's really interesting because very often team leaders in various organizations have asked me, what will happen if one of those people in my group says they are gay? How will I deal with the fallout? So there's this intrinsic fear. And so what you don't know, you're scared of, right? So I think it's an issue of, if we really want to bridge that gap, it's about training, exposure, and teaching our colleagues, our children, people around us to learn to respect differences. Otherwise, nothing is going to change. We might learn the right language, we might be able to be politically correct, but to be able to take a stand is a whole other issue.
Right, I'll actually follow up before I move to Ajay. But you've been in the field for decades now, and you're pretty the NAS Foundation is iconic kind of in that space. What are the changes? And I'm sure in the 80s, it was very difficult. And from what I read of you, you were just back from New York and
when I first started.
And through the years and through the decades, what are the changes that you see in terms of the social conditioning, attitudes, and of people, seeking employment, equality?
It's interesting. Obviously, there have been huge changes, right? Not at the pace that one would like to see it happen, but the changes are there. The very fact that we're sitting here today and discussing this is a huge change. There was no space for gay people to express themselves. And when I say a violent environment, I really do mean a violent environment, especially for example, the trans community, because they are more visible. So the attacks on them, all of that. There was no space for gay people, for gay men to be open about their sexuality. For women, for lesbian women, not at all. And the situation for lesbian women even today is a lot worse than it is for gay people. Because, of course, I have my own take on this, which I'm anyway going to share, is that I think in a patriarchal society like ours, which is very patriarchal, nothing challenges patriarchy more than a woman saying that she wants to live the rest of her life with another woman and doesn't need a man. So clearly, that does not go down well with society. But I think changes have happened in the sense, for one, homosexuality has been decriminalized. And I think that was the first step to bring about change. I remember when we got the Delhi High Court judgment in 2009, there were so many young people who came out. It was unbelievable. And it was so horrifying when the courts finally said, no, go back into the closet. And then it was so many years, again, we had to wait before homosexuality was finally decriminalized. Anyway, the point is that that's happened, and that was the first step that allowed for the space to at least start talking about these issues. But we are still living in the dark ages. No? The community still does not have any rights. So rights that everyone in a democracy takes for granted, in a country like India, we are not thinking of marriage as a right. We can't imagine not being married. There are no spaces for single people. Yet, people from the community are not allowed to get married. They're not allowed to adopt. They're not allowed to inherit. What are we doing? So, clearly there's a huge gap. But that's a whole new journey that has to start, or has started actually.
Okay, so we'll connect back to the changes that you see today, and we'll see how hopeful you are, of today and into the future. But moving on to Ajay, I think I'll again, keep the question very, very simple, because obviously you're a practitioner, looking at employment and employability from a very sort of, on a very practitioner tarmac. So Ajay, diversity plus collaboration is equal to great innovation. That's what they say. Your comments, please.
Sure. So I think ever since the discussion on diversity started, I think that has gone multiple decades behind, right? At every stage, when there was a new diversity or new element which was recognized, to start with, it was on a gender-based diversity. Then came in more on ethnicity. Subsequently, all the issues which got dealt with was multi-generational workforce. So all these are forms of diversity, and now we are addressing the LGBTQ factors, right? So from that perspective, each of those stages where the definition of diversity changed, it got linked with business outcomes in some form or shape. But I would rather take a step back, that if we look at it from an organization perspective, an organization exists in this world, and world is represented in a particular way. And till the time the organization's construct is very different than what the world has, there will always be dissonance. And that dissonance has to be reduced. And that is where inclusion comes into picture. Example would be that we might say that 50% of the world population probably gets into employability stage, right? And if that 50% is uniformly representing the population across various categories, then those should be adequately represented within the organization as well. And that is the journey which the organizations need to do. And that has happened at every stage when we looked at the diversity.
Okay, you would say that that the pace of change, perhaps, or the IND policies that we have, it would step up, or it would accelerate, perhaps, in a faster direction, in a faster manner, than perhaps other aspects of within the social change, right? When it comes to employability within the world.
Absolutely, because if I just try to extrapolate it, it's more on that, okay, there is a certain element of unknown. So therefore, first it has to be made known. And that's where, whether you call it training, you talk about making it more awareness centric. How do you go across and do that? And that has happened at every stage whenever the definition got brought in. It took a few years for organizations to realize how to make that transition, how to make their internal population more aware of. So if you look at in Renew's context, so last 2 years, I think we have broad-based the definition slowly, right? 2 years back when I came on board, at that point in time, it was more of gender diversity as the only element. Last year, we started recognizing the Pride Month for the first time, and we did it only for a week because we wanted to do a few of those awareness sessions. Because for us, it is so our industry is more of projects, manufacturing, so therefore workforce is of particular nature, and therefore education and awareness also needs to be stepped up in that direction. So therefore we decided that we are going to take it slowly. This year we are celebrating the entire month. We are having many more engagements, including today's discussion, and we are having a few more sessions going through. So we are trying to increase that. That should start resulting into things getting a bit more transparency, a bit more acceptability, and then trying to focus our attempts on hiring proactively. And I think that's the journey which we are trying to go.
Okay, I'll get back to more questions, more aspects on that. But moving back to Anjali, and again, tying in with the previous question, you mentioned that back in the day, you used to see that it was very, very difficult society, for change to usher in. So, in today's context, could I ask you that what are the challenges that you feel that you see people are feeling, and perhaps you can share some experiences because you talk to young people at length. And
it's interesting. I've seen change happen. We observe tremendous change, yet it feels we're still stuck at where we started. Because I think unless there is a huge change, and what you said earlier, that it needs to be more broad-based, things are not going to change. For example, even earlier when I first started my work, it was not uncommon for me to hear young people ask me, is there any medicine to make me feel different? And it used to break my heart because it's not a disease, right? I do a lot of family counseling. And usually 9 out of 10 cases, 9.5 out of 10 cases, this happens. That young people, it's usually men who are brought in for counseling. And the parents, they come with the parents. Parents will say, after a couple of hours of head banging, okay, I accept my son as he is, but tell him to get married. So I'm like, but he doesn't want to get married. They say, no, let him get married. What he does, all he has to do is get married and have a few kids. What he does in his own time is his lookout. No one is going to question. So it kind of dovetails into how we look at marriage, women's sexuality, right? But look at the trauma that individual has to go through to wake up every morning next to someone you don't want to be with. And then think about the woman. But none of that matters. And I think as a society, all of us, including me, we all are very good at living 2 lives. One for society and one for ourselves. This is the way we are, I think. This is my take on our culture. We had another case, you were asking for examples, where this couple that had lived together for 30 years, the family had disowned them. One of them got sick. He was in the hospital. The family suddenly emerged. We don't know from where. They did not allow his partner to come in to visit. Unfortunately, this gentleman died. He had willed everything to his partner. They had made a will where they'd willed to each other. In spite of the law being on the side of the partner, because you can will your property to anybody. They are sitting in court, they've challenged it. So I'm just saying, unless the laws protect the community, it's going to continue to be tough for them.
I'd like to ask you again a very open-ended question. What is the incentive of companies to have a D&I policy?
Okay. So if we look at it from most of the companies today, you look at any of the organizations globally, everybody talks about innovation, everybody talks about a solution-centric approach, everybody talks about customer centricity. So look at either of these aspects. If you talk about innovation, innovation is nothing but trying to get a very diverse set of thoughts together to create a particular solution, right? Or if you look at it from a customer centricity perspective, customers are from all walks of life, and your products as well as your company's image should be able to tie off with each one of those. They should be able to relate to each one of those. And all those would be the reasons why companies are going incentive. And that is how this entire piece has emerged, at least last 3 to 4 decades that I have seen in the industry. That is how this entire proliferation of inclusion across the organizations has happened. And that journey will continue. I don't think that journey is going to get impacted or anybody is thinking other way around. The process or the pace of change will continue to evolve, and that will vary from company to company depending on at what stage and what mindset, what leadership constituents are driving that particular organization. For me, so if I just go back a decade, so I think I was working with Dell in those days. So Dell globally was a very strong proponent as far as inclusion and diversity is concerned. And the predominant connection which was made within the organization was that yes, I have to cater to each and every customer globally. And if my product can be customized by each of my customers, because that was a unique selling proposition of Dell, that gets enhanced significantly if I have those population groups represented within my employee base. It's as simple as that.
A lot of research has also thrown up the fact that aspects of competency, empathy, creativity, and obviously resulted to growth across teams along performances. Behaviors, for sure, sort of are getting much more enriched when you have, when you have a robust I&D policy. And that's what research after research have, at least where the corporate and financial sectors have also thrown out. My question to you, Anjali, is that do you see perhaps, of course, the realities as you mentioned, as an advocate and worker, from on the ground up, do you see wings of change? And maybe it's in lesser portion or proportion? And if so, could you elaborate?
Of course there is change happening. No one can deny that. The very fact that people, in spite of our laws not being gender neutral, for example, you have a lot of organizations and companies who are going above and beyond the law in a positive way by making their policies gender neutral, right? That's a huge step. It's not an easy thing to do, but companies are doing it. That makes a lot of difference. So, look, I don't think you're going to be able to stop change. And the example he gave of the kind of policies that exist were driven by certain thought leaders within certain companies. And those companies are still around. And we're bound to see those changes happening. And how long are you going to not see that change happen? Of course it's going to happen. The laws are going to change. They have to change. They have to keep pace with the time. And young people from smaller towns who may not have had the exposure that is ideal. So the corporates have a huge role to play. So I'm hoping that this goes beyond Pride Month. That's the other thing. We cannot limit DNI to Pride Month, right? Or IND, is that what you call it? IND to Pride Month.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you for your comments and interventions, both of you. Final words from me. The problems of the present can be minimized in the future by recognizing today the needs of different groups. So we can stare into the benefits of diversity and inclusion within an organization and indeed the world and the society at large. Do share your comments below. Follow us on social media for engagements and interactions on everything sustainability, inclusion, and the energy transition. Thank you.